voters of the Lake Forest, Lake Bluff area, and I'm happy to welcome you to our candidate forum and debate today. As you may know, the League is a national organization with over 800 chapters. It is nonpartisan, and it was founded 100 years ago to register and educate newly enfranchised voters following the passage of the 19th Amendment. Another fact that's relatively unknown is the fact that the League has hosted presidential debates until the 1970s. Today, the League welcomes men and women of age 16 and above. We foster informed and active participation in government, and we strive to influence public policy through public education and advocacy. We host forums and debates, like this one, to assist voters with informed choices. Throughout its history, the League has promoted voting rights legislation, supporting concepts such as the motor voter law and early voting, which, by the way, starts tomorrow in Lake Forest. So I hope all of you, after your debate today, once you've made your decision, that you'll march on down to City Hall and actually put it into action, early voting. Ward elections have been characterized by low turnout. Local elections can be lost or won by a handful of votes. Today, I encourage you to inspire your friends and neighbors to vote in the April election, and also to join the League of Women Voters. We're planning a host of centennial activities in addition to our regular discussion and educational opportunities. We encourage you to join us. You can check us out on the web at lwvlflb.org or follow us on Facebook. And today, it's my great pleasure to introduce Paula Lawson. Paula will introduce our speakers and explain the rules of the forum. She is our moderator. According to League policy, and to avoid the appearance of favoritism, Paula lives outside of Lake Forest. In fact, she lives outside of Lake County in the voting district. She is a member of the Glencoe League of Women Voters. She also has an incredible profile. She's been past president, treasurer, and issues vice president of the League of Women Voters of Illinois. Paula is currently an issues specialist on redistricting for our state league. And it's my great pleasure once again to introduce Paula.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, thank you, Ari. I'd like to invite Mr. George Pandeleon, who is the uncontested candidate for Lake Forest Mayor, to make a statement.
Thank you very much, and thanks everybody for coming today, and thanks to the League for arranging this candidate forum. I'm George Pandeleon. I may not look half Irish, but I am. And so I've got my County Antrim plaid on here, in case anybody was wondering. I can see a lot of green out there. Hope everybody behaved themselves yesterday. My wife Peggy and I moved to Lake Forest 30 years ago, raised our 3 grown children here, and by way of background, I run a real estate investment firm for institutional investors. I've been involved in Lake Forest City government since 1993. I've chaired the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Plan Commission, the interim board that restructured Gorton Community Center after its financial collapse in 2009, and just in 2017 ended a 6-year term as Alderman from the 2nd Ward, and I was also the chairman of the Finance Committee, along with other committee assignments during that 6-year period. Before I make my formal statement, I wanted to tell you all a little story about how I came to be involved in Lake Forest City government. My wife and I moved here. We loved the town. We had loved the town since we were in school together down in Evanston. And a postcard showed up in my mailbox. And it was a volunteer call from the caucus. And so I filled out the postcard, sent it in, and actually got an interview. And they asked me what I'd like to be involved with, and I said something real estate related would make sense. So I went through all the interviews, and then they came and said, well, we really like you, you're a nice guy, but you know, we got a lot of qualified real estate people in this town, so this isn't your year, but you know, hang around for a while, you'll never know what might happen. Get involved in something else. So I did, and a couple of years later, I got a call saying, we have an opening on the zoning board for a person in your ward, and you know, would you be interested? And I said, sure, and I went back through the interview process all over again, but this time I actually got the job, so I was happy about that. But I guess the point of the story is that this notion that the caucus is some sort of cabal of insiders is completely at odds with my personal experience. There are 10 volunteers from each ward. Their job is to you know, recruit and find and vet people. And It's a very open process, at least in my experience. So now for my more formal statement. When I filled out that postcard, I certainly never expected to be standing here as a candidate for mayor 30 years later, but that's the way it's worked out. I've gotten a lot of learning and experience, and I've met a lot of great people, and I've got to work with a lot of great people over those 30 years. Lake Forest residents enjoy a truly extraordinary quality of life and community. We live in one of the safest, best managed, and most beautiful cities in the country. This is not an accident. It's the result of exceptional vision, governance, management, and philanthropy by literally thousands of resident volunteers and highly professional city staff members since the city's founding in 1856. But we have, as always, a number of significant challenges ahead. Major local employers like Kraft, Mondelez, Walgreens, Takeda, Pfizer, and others continue to move their headquarters operations downtown or out of state, which reduces demand for real estate here in town, and we can all see that in our home values. I saw a chart on Zillow yesterday, pretty striking, about 60045 zip code. The state mandates labor agreements for our city employees. Personnel costs are over 70% of the city budget, and those expenses drive a 4% growth rate on the expense side, and we only have a 2% growth rate on the revenue side. We have succeeded over the years in pushing out the point of deficit from originally 2016, I believe, to 2026 now. If there's a property tax freeze, that number comes back to 2022. But it's a fight every single year, and that's the big struggle. And the other issues are that the state continues to pursue policies that cause people of means and education to leave the state entirely. And we all know people who have done that. So this is the tide that we're rowing against. Lake Foresters have always banded together in challenging times and found ways to overcome obstacles and end up making the city better than ever. Today, we stand tall in a very tough environment. Our AAA bond rating and strong financial reserves ensure solid access to capital to preserve and enhance Lake Forest's infrastructure, efficient, high-quality municipal services, and quality of life. Our property tax rates are extremely competitive versus our immediate neighbors and the Chicago area as a whole. We have much to offer growing families seeking local employment, a true sense of community, safety, and educational and recreational excellence. But we can't control all the forces impinging on us. But we can continue to focus on managing what we do control. We should share our vision. We should come together to remind our residents and the broader marketplace what an incredible place Lake Forest is to live. My intent is to gather all of Lake Forest's positive energy from all of our community stakeholders to preserve what we have, address our challenges, and tell our story. I'm bringing strong, constructive relationships with key stakeholders, including current city council members, leaders of boards and commissions, other city institutions, and perhaps most importantly, the city staff. In a time of change at the city manager level, that executive staff is absolutely crucial. And job number one is to make sure that there's a smooth and unobservable transition. I'm a true volunteer. My only agenda is to do what's best for all the residents of Lake Forest. This is where my wife and I have lived for 30 years, we've raised our children, and we've come to love. I'm truly honored to have this opportunity, and I look forward to all of you who are my neighbors, supporting these efforts by voting for me, I guess starting tomorrow, but officially on April 2nd. Thank you very much, and I look forward to working with all of you.
Now I'd like to welcome the candidates for the 3rd Ward for the Lake Forest City Council. They are Dr. Joanne Desmond and Dr. Ara Gushgari. I'm going to go over the rules. The candidates agreed to the rules in advance. First of all, there is no video or photos to be taken during the forum unless it's by the press or the person that's authorized to do the video taping. Audience questions will be written on index cards and read by me, the moderator. Questions are to be directed to both candidates. The league and the moderator reserve the right to review, edit, and select questions for clarity, conciseness, appropriateness, and to avoid duplication. The moderator makes the final decisions as to the questions being asked. If you would like to have a question asked, please raise your hand, and we have a runner that will give you a card and you can write the question down. Okay. When you finish writing your question, just raise your hand up with the card and they'll be picked up. Candidates drew lots in advance of the forum to determine who gave the first opening statement. And the first statement will go to Dr. Gashgarian. Candidates then will be alternating their answers to questions. The opening remarks are 1.5 minutes. Candidates are given 1.5 minutes to respond to questions, and the moderator has the authority to shorten or lengthen candidate response times uniformly. The closing statements are also 1.5 minutes and given in reverse order of presentation of opening statement. The candidates are asked to remain seated during the forum because of the taping, and the audience will be asked to hold applause to the end of the forum. Okay. Now we're ready for opening statements, and Dr. Gashgarian goes first.
Before I want to get started, I just do want to reach out and thank the League of Women Voters for holding this important forum, and to you, Paula, for coming in and making the trip up here. And one last note, I actually just saw on my app that George, it's my understanding that you're a shoo-in on this election. Premature, Dr. Desmond and I would like to, congratulate you. Be the first ones to congratulate you. So, well, first off, when the caucus approached me, they asked me, why do you want to be the 3rd Ward candidate for Alderman? And my response was really simple. It was simply, because I love Lake Forest, this town, and I want to make this a better place, and I want you to realize that. We all do. My folks moved to Lake Forest in 1971, and I attended Everett School, I attended Deer Path, and I attended Lake Forest High School. My first job was here in town, and many of you may be familiar with it. It's Sunset Foods, and I rode my bike back and forth up to Sunset Foods and was a bag boy there. I started my business in town here 28 years ago, a busy orthodontic practice, managing patients, staff, pensions, healthcare costs, and the lot. Most importantly, I raised my family in town here. My wife and I have raised 4 beautiful, strong daughters, and I'm very proud of them. My passion for this position of Alderman lies in the deep roots and love of this community. For close to 10 years, I volunteered with the Friends of Lake Forest Parks and Recreation, serving to improve and enhance the quality of life here in Lake Forest. Currently, I'm working with Alderman Beidler Newman on a $3.5 million capital improvement project that's being funded by private dollars in conjunction with Sally's 4,000.
Time is up. Okay, thank you. And now we have Dr. Desmond for her opening statement. It should just be
It's on. Thank you. Thank you, by the way, to the League of Women Voters for this opportunity. I am here today to gain your support in my candidacy for 3rd Ward Alderman. In my career, I served as the school superintendent in 3 high-performing school districts, where I was the CEO to an elected Board of Education and responsible, fiscally accountable to the taxpayers. I have planned and managed budgets in excess of $65 million, negotiated labor contracts, planned the construction of public buildings, developed strategic plans, secured millions of dollars in federal and state grant funding, and worked collaboratively with all stakeholders in my district. As a 24-year resident of Lake Forest who cares about our city, I have much to offer if elected as your alderman. I have been conducting a listening tour with residents about what matters to our city. If elected, I will be your voice on the City Council and by working with you, make our city even better. I have done this in every community where I have served the public. I'm counting on your support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to note that we have league members right here in the front row, that they have a minute card, 30-second card, and a stop card who are doing the timing. Okay, first question goes to Dr. Desmond first. Other than the third rail, what are the significant environmental issues facing our community, and what do you plan to do about those?
Well, there's a number of significant environmental issues facing our community, and one of the major ones is flooding, which I've heard from many of the residents, and with the development of Foxconn and the inadequate mitigation of wetlands in Wisconsin and their formula not being adequate, we have significant future impact on flooding in our community. I think that that's one of the major things that we have to address across our community is flooding. Certainly the impact of the trains on our community was major because that we know that the diesels emit particulate that is carcinogenic, and that would impact our entire community. That had a substantial impact on us. And I think we need to be concerned about all the environmental impacts that any outside influence may present for our community. I actually am concerned about preserving the quality of life that we have in our community, and that's a very important thing for me to work on. Thank you.
So if you want to restate the question, I think
All right.
it'd be helpful.
The question is about environmental issues, and it says, other than the third rail, what are significant environmental issues facing our community, and what do you plan to do about those?
Well, just as Dr. Desmond had articulated, I think flooding is a major component, and it's not only on a local level, but more regionally. Again, dealing with the Foxconn issue, the 3 drainage basins that we have here in Lake Forest. I want to take this a step further, folks, and something that's a critical issue, and I hope we all are behind this. I was sitting in Senator Richard Durbin's office about 2.5 weeks ago in Washington, discussing some issues with him related to health care. And the senator's office looked across the table at me and said, "What do you think about ethylene oxide?" And I'm not sure how familiar you are with this, but it's something I think we all need to be dialed in on. And of course, they solicited my opinion in terms of my thoughts as it pertains to my profession. Ethylene oxide has been identified, was recategorized in 2016 from probable to definite carcinogen. And we now currently have 3 plants operating very close within the city, outside of the city of Lake Forest limits. I've had discussions with Senator Durbin. I've had discussions with State Senator Julie Morrison, and I have even reached out to the mayor of Gurnee, who is a personal friend, Mayor Christy Kovarik, and we're working together collaboratively to address these issues. Gosh, we're all against the third rail, let me make that clear. It will always and forever be something that I am opposed to. But we have to look on a little broader scale, and let's pull together on this one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next question goes again to Dr. Gashgarian first. Do you think it is important for the city to keep its AAA bond rating?
Well, I want to make one thing clear. What you see sitting up here is an educator and an orthodontist. And although we've worked with budgets, I've done so with the American Association of Orthodontists managing policy, finance, and advocacy in Washington, in the state of Illinois, and locally. I think we're going to turn towards city staff and Elizabeth Hollop, who's our budget and finance director, an important individual. Maintaining AAA bond rating status is an important facet for most communities, and we're one of only 60 across the country, I believe, that has that status. It allows us to maintain the ability to borrow money inexpensively, number one. I too am also very much opposed to raising taxes on any of us in this community. I do not want to overspend or put the city in financial jeopardy by overspending, and I want to manage the fiscal responsibility well that we have here. AAA bond rating status is part of that bigger picture, And if it goes to keeping our property taxes low and trying to maintain our property values, I am for it. Thank you.
Okay. And Dr. Desmond on the AAA bond rating.
Thank you, yes. In all of the districts that I have managed as a school superintendent on the North Shore, we have had AAA bond rating. It is important to me to be fiscally responsible. The interest rate for units of government that have AAA bond ratings is substantially reduced, especially in environments where the interest rates are high. I also think that in our city, where I just attended a finance meeting on Monday, we have a 42% budget reserve. We have adequate funding reserves in our funds. In the general fund alone, we have $32 million reserve fund. We are at 42% when the AAA rating percentage requires a 25%. We have sufficient revenue to address a number of the concerns in our community without jeopardizing the AAA bond rating that would afford us considerably reduced interest rates. So yes, I definitely think we should be fiscally responsible. That's what I've done in every single community that I have represented, and I would expect that we would do the same here in Lake Forest.
Okay, thank you. The next question is another kind of fiscal question to Dr. Desmond first. What can we do about pension costs?
Okay, well, this is a very good question. And one of the things I don't like to hear is that, oh, we have no control over this. This is the state's issue. Any decision that is made by people and influenced by people, we can have some influence over. Just as Dr. Gushgarian said, we go to the people that represent us, that make these laws. Currently, there are 6 bills on the public safety pension that is of most concern because there's 653 of them across the state and they are not well managed and not efficiently overseen versus the Illinois Municipal Fund pension, which is very well funded at 98% and is an example of what can be happening in all of these public safety funds. So what I would say is we need to be active and go after our legislators to represent us and say this is not fair. 6 bills are in Senate study right now that could make a significant difference in the cost and management of these pension funds. And I want to know how our city is working hard to influence the decision makers to help us so that we can save money on pensions across the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
So obviously in the state of Illinois, we're 2 steps away from junk bond status, and I think we all have to know that, and it is a critical issue. We are well funded in the municipal pension fund at actually 98.7%. And in the city of Lake Forest, we're at 50 and 70% respectively with the police pension fund and the fire pension fund. So much of this is dictated by state regulations and directives, much in the way that many of the school districts that Dr. Desmond has worked for, their funds are essentially dictated by the state of Illinois, the Illinois State Board of Education, which I'm sure has been a thorn in your side many years. They're the ones who actually control those budgets. And thank you for working as a top flight administrator. What the city of Lake Forest can do is manage what we have over our oversight, and that is the municipal pension fund, and constantly monitoring and being effective in terms of controlling our costs. The most effective way, again, is to reach out with our state legislators, and again, with my personal relationship with those in state governance, and they are many. I was in a discussion with Dr. Christy Kovarik, Mayor Kovarik, with Melinda Bush, who's a state representative, state senator, as well as Senator Julie Morrison. And these, I have let them know that this is a concern and a priority for us, all of us in this room. So I want to thank you for asking that question.
Thank you. And this next question again goes to Dr. Gushgarian first.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a little check off here. What is the biggest challenge facing the 3rd Ward and what will you do about it?
Well, I think our challenges are many and varied. And I'll tell you what my first challenge is bringing us together. I think that there's been a large segment of the ward who has felt like their voices haven't been heard. And I am specifically looking to Dr. Desmond's supporters. I want you to know that I hear you and I will represent you well. Our challenges that function within the city ward, within the third ward, I think as we have both articulated, flooding issues, keeping the third rail out of Lake Forest, being concerned with environmental issues, and then an overall view of things that are happening in the city. What goes on in the third ward is important to us, but I think we both, at least I know, I care about the bluff issues that are occurring on the east side of town, the flooding issues that are occurring on the south side of town. I'm concerned with renovations of projects in town like the Lake Forest Library. I want to represent all of Lake Forest as the third ward alderman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next challenge to the third ward.
Right. And I want to expand on that because I think those are things we all would agree on. One of the most important things, I believe, is to make sure that we are accessible and responsible to our public, to listen to what your concerns are. And I will say that one of the first things I would like to do, if I am elected as your alderman, is to bring Resolution 2018-20 back to the council for a revote. And in that resolution, basically, it said that city council members are discouraged from communicating with the public about any matter that might come before the city council and before any of the boards or commissions. And if they do, they need to report that to the mayor or to the city manager. That, to me, is an obstacle in helping work together as a community. So that's a very important thing for me. Addressing your concerns means listening to your concerns, means hearing what you have to say and how your voices matter. So I hope to be able to stand up with you and represent you as your alderman and know what your concerns are. We agree on a lot of that.
Okay. Yeah, next goes to Dr. Desmond, and it's sort of in the same vein, but I'm going to combine two questions. What refreshing or new perspectives do you bring to the city council, and how do you plan to communicate with third ward residents?
Well, that's an extension of what I had indicated earlier. I plan to make myself available. I am a retired professional. I have lots of time. I want to hear what you have to say, and I have demonstrated that I stand up for the people in our ward. If there is a concern, I think that if a concern affects someone in the third ward, generally speaking, it affects our entire community. I feel like this, like Dr. Gashgarian said, I'm just as concerned about the beachfront as I am about the Middle Fork Savannah that's in our ward. We need to be concerned about the whole city. But if something happens in the third ward that impacts our perception, our quality of life, that affects eventually the entire city. So I will work hard for our ward, for the constituents, and hear what you have to say, and I will represent the entire city of Lake Forest, because if we're all better together.
Okay. Would you like me to repeat that? Yeah. What refreshing or new perspectives do you bring to the city council, and how do you plan to communicate with the third ward residents?
Well, I think what I believe will be refreshing to all of you is my communication style. I'm somebody who has always been available. I'm a firm believer that an alderman should be a conduit of information, both inward and outward. And I was a little bit puzzled, Dr. Desmond, when you said we're discouraged from talking to the public about issues in front of city council. I think it's actually imperative on an issue that's in front of city council that I go out and seek your opinions. Because if it's something that you care about, I want to know. And if it's something that you feel strongly about, it will influence my representation of the third ward. I am a communicator. I am someone I tend to be very gregarious, and sometimes I love to talk, but I'm even more so I love to listen. One of my brothers told me there's a reason why God gave you 2 ears and just 1 mouth, and I think that's an important thing. So I am someone who wants to interact, and I understand that the perception has been in the past of this wall of silence. That is not going to be the case when I'm elected alderman. I am going to be here for you. I am. Thank you.
Okay. The next question goes to Dr. Gushgarian again first. Do you have any affiliations, whether personal, business, or otherwise, that present a potential conflict of interest with the city?
That would have been a great disclaimer for us to both sign off on, is no. No, I've never done business with the city of Lake Forest. I don't anticipate having any type of business interaction with the city of Lake Forest. My purpose of living here is because I think Lake Forest is the best community in the state. My purpose for being here is because I think it's such a fine city. I want to serve this city, and I want to serve you, my fellow residents. So I wish I could give you something more than that, but no, I don't have any potential conflicts of interest. Thank you.
Okay. And Dr. Desmond, on conflicts of interest?
No, since I'm not working, I really have no conflicts of interest, no business. I actually have the same interest in using the talents and skills that I have gained over a lifetime and long career of serving the public to help serve our community. Because I believe we're very, very good, but I also believe we could be better. In every district I've served, and I've served in some top-notch school districts, one of the most important things is there is change. We can't remain the way we always have been because the world keeps changing. So we as a community have to move ahead. We don't want to be Blockbuster, we don't want to be Sears. We want to be Lake Forest. That's the place where everyone wants to be because this is the best quality of life we could possibly have. And that's my passion, that's what I work hard for, and that's what I would continue to do for all of you if I'm elected as your alderman.
Okay, now we have a different topic for Dr. Desmond first. How do you think repair should be handled at the library?
That's a very good question. I believe the library, well, one of the things for me that's very, very important, and I think one of the highlights of our community is that we have so many educational institutions. We have great public schools, we have amazing private schools, we have a college and a graduate program here, and we have a library that quite frankly is a treasure, and it needs a lot of work. It needs to have attention. It's a historic building, it is in very, very poor shape, doesn't even meet life safety codes and ADA accessibilities, and we have to look at that as being something that it belongs to all of us. And yes, we'll need to raise funds for that. We need to work hard to make that library vibrant and meet the 21st century. You know, I started in a school district, Frankfurt, that had an 1890s charm as their theme. I said it's a great theme for a community, but it's a terrible theme for schools. We want to be up-to-date, progressive, and preparing our students for the future. And we want our community to be posed to accept the future and be leaders in the future, not dragging behind. Preserving our historic background, our historic traditions, while we also move our community forward so that we're at the forefront. Thank you.
Okay, and Dr. Gushgarian, how do you think repair should be handled at the library?
Well, what I want to do is kind of talk about what has been the tradition within the city of Lake Forest. I myself personally have been involved in this $3.5 million revitalization within the city with the Deer Path Golf Course. There's a history of participation in terms of public-private partnerships. That is the key. The library now has anticipated somewhere between an $8 and $15 million cost for renovation, which is a pretty dramatic thing. I do have the experience and I have a track record of reaching out beyond the taxpayers. I have a history of being creative in terms of bringing revenues into the city and allowing for public partnerships to help facilitate that development. And quite honestly continue to maintain the lifestyle within the city of Lake Forest. We look at the North Beach Road access that caved in. We had several benefactors there. We look at the Forest Park project. We had several benefactors there. We look at the Deer Path Golf Course. We have several benefactors there. That to me is the answer. $8 to $15 million is a big target, but I know we can do it, and I know we have people in this community that do have the outreach that can generate those types of revenues to maintain that gem, which is a Lake Forest Library. It's part of my passion.
Okay, thank you. Again, this next question goes to Dr. Gashgarian, and there are two questions related to property taxes. The first one is, do you believe a property tax increase is needed to address infrastructure problems facing Lake Forest? We'll do Pendelec first.
You want to answer that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm actually going to ask twice. I was just.
So if I can rephrase that question, do I believe that there's a property tax increase needed to fund capital improvements?
Correct.
All right, so just a little bit of background on that. What we have in the city of Lake Forest is a transfer tax. And currently, as of fiscal year, I think 2018, we were able to utilize that entire city transfer tax, real estate transfer tax, which is $1.5 million, $1,460,000, I believe. And we're utilizing that fund exclusively to go through and itemize those high priority issues, those capital improvements that are required. I do not think that we need to raise property taxes, and I am averse to raising taxes in this town. I just don't see a reason for it.
Okay.
You want to do
Yes.
two parts? So it's
No,
really
we'll
two parts.
switch.
and then one
I meant
part.
to say I was going to have two questions on property taxes. Okay, this is asking if you believe a property tax increase is needed to address infrastructure problems.
My answer is absolutely not. People are just tired of taxes being raised and fees being raised, and as it was mentioned earlier, Illinois is going to be the place everyone escapes from. We need to absolutely watch our funding. However, we have funds in our budget. Right now, for the last 6 years, we've taken in revenue $2 million in excess of our expenditures. We certainly have a lot of taxes. We're raising our sanitation tax 50%. The city just added another 0.5% to the home rule sales tax. There is money to address these problems. From what the staff has indicated, there's $35 million worth of projects that need to be completed within the next 5 years, and much of that is infrastructure. That's not going to be done just by the transfer tax alone. We have to look at what we have in our budget, and we have to plan. We develop a plan that addresses these issues so that we can hit the highest priority issues first. And I watched a plan that had worked out to fiscal year 64 to do sewer improvements. And quite frankly, I don't think most people want to wait 40 years so that their basements don't flood. So I think that we can do this. I think we have to look thoughtfully at it, and I think we have to look at the money that we have that we're already collecting and make sure that we use this in a way to hit the priorities. Thank you.
And again, back to Dr. Desmond. What are your suggestions for holding the line on property taxes? I think you touched on it, but
too. I think I did. I think that when we look at our budget, we certainly want to have a AAA rating. We need to absolutely have a 25% reserve funding, because that's a fiscally responsible thing to do. It's fiscally conservative, and I am fiscally conservative. Every single school district I've run, I've made sure that they are in a better position financially than when I started, and I believe that will happen in Lake Forest. I think we have to look at what we have as high priorities, but clearly the depreciating property values are related to flooding, people being unable to fare their homes because there's flooding in the streets and there's flooding in their basements. And in fact, 1301 Western, I was visiting there. They were telling me about the flood so bad in their back parking lot that 26 automobiles were destroyed. We can't have that continue in our community. We have to address these most significant problems. And we don't need to raise we do not need to raise taxes to do that, because I believe in looking at the budget, we have the resources to address these over a more expeditious time frame. Thank you.
Okay. And Dr. Kashgarian? What are your suggestions for holding the line on property taxes?
Well, first off, I think the city has done an excellent job. If we look at city payrolls 10 years ago, there were 256 full-time employees. Efficiency is the most important aspect, I think, of municipal governance. Currently, I believe we have 206, and I'm going to ask somebody to fact-check that for me. I think that what we need to do is make sure that we're always keeping our eye on the brass ring and controlling costs from within, number one. Number two, I think development is probably the most important aspect of this. As I look at development, what I'm thinking about is new and younger members moving into town and viewing property values. It is going to be a high priority and a concern for me. Making sure that we have property values that are such where the regular tax rate, which is the lowest in Lake County, by the way, is maintained, and we're able to maintain a good, healthy cash flow with our revenues from the existing property taxes. Just yesterday morning, I had welcomed a forum with the realtors in town, with the professionals who are offering us guidance in terms of how we can increase people looking at Lake Forest to come into town and want to live here. I think that's an incredibly important aspect, bringing people to Lake Forest. State of Illinois lost 45,000 residents last year. The pie is getting smaller, and I want to make sure that those qualified, those who have an interest for low taxes, best schools, best environment, come here to Lake Forest.
Okay. And again to Dr. Kashgarian, the next question. Alderman must work with the city staff. Describe your relationship and experience with city staff, citing specific examples.
Well, I've had the benefit of being here for most of my life, and I have some long-standing relationships with city staff. My long-term relationship with city staff in general has been very good. The first thing that comes to mind is when the Lake Forest Hospital project was being proposed. And I don't know if any of you were in the city council meetings when we were discussing that, but I attended 4 of those, and I remember about a week or 2 later, I was walking down the street, and the director of business development stopped me and said, what are your thoughts? And I shared them with her. They weren't exactly what the hospital had proposed, but she solicited my opinion, and I said, Kathy, this is what I see, and this is what I think. It was a very amicable exchange. I have worked with city staff. My wife and I have built a house in town. We've renovated a commercial property in town. We've done an addition in town. I've had a great deal of interaction with city staff. I have a personal relationship with the director of Forestry, Parks, and Recreation, Sally Swarthout, as well as many of their staff members. And quite honestly, my relationship with staff is excellent. I will parlay that into what's good for the 3rd Ward.
Okay. Dr. Desmond, describe your relationship and experience with city staff.
Thank you. I've been attending city council meetings for over 2.5 years now, and I have had the opportunity to work with a number of city staff members in my role as the president of our homeowners association at Academy Woods. So I have a great deal of respect for the hardworking staff that we have in the city. And I believe that as a city council member, I will definitely depend on their expertise and work closely with them. I think they've served the city well. I think they're people who care about the city. They also take direction from the city council and from the mayor and from the city manager. I think it's very important for the city council to help give direction and guidance so that they represent all of the people of our community. They are talented, we value them, as do we value all of the people who work for our city and serve the public.
Okay, thank you. There are 3 questions, and I'm trying to combine them a little bit, that concern the freight holding track, okay? So the first one is, the idling track for freight trains seems less of a threat. What will you do if government decides they will build it? What is your stance and what action will you take?
Okay.
And have you done anything in the past to advocate against us?
Well, I've been called the train lady everywhere, and I certainly know a lot about trains, a lot more about trains than I ever thought I would know in my life. And fortunately, we have very good news about the train, not because we said we don't want a train here, a train holding track in Lake Forest. It's because we worked with Glenview and their village in partnership to identify a win-win solution so that the railroads can accomplish what they need to accomplish, because goodness knows we're not against railroads, we're not against trains. We have to accomplish a win-win solution so that the railroads can accomplish what they want and need, and we don't have the harmful impacts of a holding track in our community. And fortunately, through the efforts of the Village of Glenview and the action team and our collaborative efforts, we were able to find a way that the trains can accomplish what they need, and we don't need to have a holding track. Much of this also depended on our working with our legislative leaders and having engineers who are able to model alternatives that are effective and successful. I'm happy to go over those with you because I know 90 seconds won't give me the chance to do it. But we do have a solution, and we believe that that's going to be the answer, so we don't have to worry about that in the future. Thank you.
Okay. Would you like me to repeat that? The idling track for freight trains seems less of a threat. What will you do if the government decides they will build it? What is your stance and what action will you take? And have you advocated against it?
Now, first off, I think no matter what the promises are being made, we have to maintain vigilance. I think that's a critical component of that. I don't think there's a person in the room or in the city of Lake Forest that supported that third rail. As much as I think community activism is a terribly important component, I do also, unfortunately, I did hear some credit that did go up that should be given. And although it may not have seemed transparent, I do want to acknowledge that members within the city of Lake Forest, specifically the mayor, had and did reach out to Governor Rauner's office and worked in conjunction with IDOT and Metra. And there was a dialogue that was placed there. All of these things together collectively contributed. I think that's something that we need to come to grips with. And I know that there are two big camps here, but I'm the type of person that wants to bring us all together. My existing relationship with many members of local, state, and federal government is such where I have them soliciting my opinions on many, many issues. I find that working with somebody is far often better than working against somebody. The Village of Glenview was helpful. The track lady was helpful. And you were all helpful. These were all words that had impact, and I want us to work together with this.
Okay. Different topic. The next question goes to Dr. Gashgarian first. Since neither of you served on a commission previously, was running for the third ward alderman your first choice, and why?
Are you talking about a commission within the city of Lake Forest?
I would say yes, we could conclude that.
Can I get a clarification from the League of Women Voters? Because I do want to know what your question is. I want it to be more specific. I think, is anybody here going to?
Lake Forest. I was assuming a Lake Forest.
Lake Forest,
Commission.
sure, great.
Yeah.
So I will answer that initially for both of us. Neither one of us has actually served on a commission. What I have served on is a Lake Forest caucus. And as you well know, the caucus circulates, it cycles every 3 years, so there are new, fresh faces on there. And while serving on the caucus, I vetted members of boards and commissions for all 13 of those. Alderman, mayor, zoning board, BRB, you can go ahead and go down the process. So I have a very strong familiar relationship with the functionality of the city of Lake Forest. Secondly, which is not a commission, but I have worked for 10 years with the Friends of Lake Forest Parks and Recreation. I've been responsible for contributing to the efforts to enhance and beautify and improve the quality of life through a large aspect of city budget. I've learned to work collaboratively, not only within that department, within the rec department and rec board, but also with city government, with the city manager, with the mayor, and various other entities. So I have.
Do you want me to repeat the question? Since neither of you have served on a commission previously, or say in Lake Forest, was running for the 3rd Ward Alderman your first choice, and why?
Yes, running for the 3rd Ward Alderman was my first choice, and because I think I can make a difference. I have the background in government, I have the experience, I have worked with our community for several years now on a grassroots effort. I care about our community, and I believe I can make a contribution. We have a new city manager who seems like a wonderful young man who hasn't been a city manager prior to this. We have a new mayor who hasn't been a mayor. I have served in government, and I believe my experience and the difference I've made in the communities that I have served will be a contributing factor to making our community an even better place. So, thank you.
There's 3 more questions here, and I think in order to get them in the time allowed, we'll have the responses be a minute instead of a minute and a half. Okay. This next question goes to Dr. Desmond first. How does the negative campaigning fit in with the Lake Forest theme of Welcome Home?
Well, I don't believe in negative campaigning. I am not running against anything or anyone. I am running for alderman. I do not believe in negative campaigning. I believe in either looking at my credentials as someone who can serve the 3rd Ward. It's a volunteer position. I want to volunteer because I think I can help and make a difference. The person who was endorsed by the caucus is a great guy. I've heard this from many, many people, and I'm sure you're a great orthodontist. I don't need my teeth straightened, but I do believe that we both have the same intention to make our city better. We may have some different ideas about how to go about it, but I also have that experience in working with communities and bringing people together. I've had some very, very challenging things in my career, and I look at those as opportunities to make places better, make communities better, make it better for families. And my minute's up.
Thank you. How does the negative campaigning fit in with the Lake Forest theme of Welcome Home?
It doesn't. It just plain doesn't. I'm not comfortable at all with neighborhood against neighborhood, neighbor against neighbor, side of town against side of town. It's not who I am, and I would disavow myself of anybody who said something negative about my opponent, period. We're all Lake Foresters, and we're all here for one common cause. I do have a tremendous amount of experience in terms of governance beyond the city of Lake Forest within my association as a president of the Illinois Society, the Midwestern Society, member of the House of Delegates in the American Association of Orthodontists, which is the pinnacle of one's professional career. I've had to deal with policy issues, budgetary issues, advocacy issues, and I have found that working together with my colleagues who I may have differing opinions with always yields better results. I won't tolerate negative words. I was disheartened at some of the things that I saw at City Council, and I will not let that happen while I am alderman.
Okay, thank you. The next question again goes to Dr. Goshgarian. How would you promote economic growth?
Well, I think I had articulated that a little bit earlier, right? One of my concerns, one of my priorities is economic development. To me, I think an alderman needs to be able to look outside of the box. I know that the city did and is currently holding, has a program in terms of interaction with real estate brokers and professionals. I think what we have there is good, but we need to go farther. That's why I did sit down with those realtors yesterday, and it was something that I had come up with originally when we spoke 3 or 4 months ago. I think it's important for us to bring as many young families and new families into this community as possible to drive economic development. Working with business owners in the downtown area as well as the west side, with the stakeholders who are the developers, and with stakeholders being you and I, the citizens of Lake Forest. What can we do to make this a destination and enhance the quality of life here?
Okay, and Dr. Desmond, same question. How would you promote economic growth?
It's a great question. I would look at 3 things. The first thing I would do is I would examine the obstacles that we place in front of developers that make them not want to come to our city. I attended a plan commission meeting on Wednesday, and I could absolutely see room for growth. Number 2, I would absolutely believe that it's important to look at what communities are vibrant. What are they doing in communities that have a downtown area that attracts people? Look at communities like Hinsdale and Libertyville and even Highland Park. What are they doing, and what is the best practice we could implement? And the third thing I would do, and it would be like my associate here, is talk to people in our community. What do the businesses think would bring more business into town? What do the realtors think would help revitalize our downtown area? And I would listen to what they have to say and put together a plan to address that. Thank you.
Okay. Just hold the microphone a little farther down.
Thank you.
And one more question before we have our closing, and it goes to Dr. Desmond first. It's been touched on before. As an alderman, what would you do to resolve the growing problem of flooding?
I think that it's been addressed before, but I believe that the important thing to do is to identify the most significant priorities and then have a plan that accelerates the repair of those flooding areas. But the basements are flooded. I was just at Crystal Point, and they were explaining to me about how their garage floods and that they may not be able to get relief for 5 years. I think if we have the resources to do that, we need to get that done so that the property values will not be impacted and the quality of life for people in our community could be taken care of. Thank you.
What would you do to resolve the growing problem of flooding?
Well, I would do basically what I've been doing already. I have said a while ago, I've had conversations with folks over at Crystal Point. Why? Because I own a business over there. I've had discussions with people over on Gulf Avenue. Why? Because I see it on the golf course as we're walking by. I've had discussions with my friends down at the end of Deer Path in Lexington, seeing those flooding issues there. I think an effective and most important alderman, an important thing for an alderman to do is to get out into the community and seek out issues, seek out problems. Prioritizing these problems, I think, is number one, and that it has to be done with city staff, but it's up to you guys. It's up to you as members of the community to approach and express your concerns. We're a conduit, and quite honestly, we're just one vote on the city council. The most important person in the room right now is the voter, and it should always be the voter, the resident. Seeking out those issues and addressing them is an important component of what we do.
Okay, thank you. Now we go to closing statements, and they are a minute and a half each. And Dr. Desmond goes first.
Thank you. I have heard from residents about serious issues facing our community: increased flooding, decaying infrastructure, decreasing property values, and lagging home sales. If I am given the opportunity to serve as your alderman, I am committed to work on solutions to these problems and to promote resident-friendly economic growth. My efforts to demand integrity in our government led to the uncovering of $200,000 of unauthorized spending of taxpayer dollars. The community-based coalition that I formed to preserve the environment of Lake Forest from the harmful impact of a proposed freight holding track demonstrate that I am a person of action. I will stand up for your interests. I am the only candidate who has proven leadership with experience in navigating the complexity of government public policy, budgeting, labor unions, pensions, grant funding, strategic planning, and running an organization accountable to the public. As a retired professional, I have the time and energy to give this position the attention it demands. I ask for your support in being your 3rd Ward Alderman. Thank you.
Okay. And Dr. Goshgarian, final closing statement.
Before we get started, can I say thank you to Joanne for being here with me?
Thank you.
Thank you. Again, thank you all for coming here. My priorities are well within line of who we are as a community. Infrastructure improvement, economic development, and lower taxes, and of course, we're all against the third rail. We're in this together. Together we can work on forging a greater sense of community, working with one another, rather than against. Conflict and acrimony creates chaos. It does not work as evidenced by the dysfunction that we see in the state and federal level. Our styles are very different. Our intentions are similar. Ben Franklin once said, remember not only to say the right thing at the right place, but far more difficult, leave unsaid the wrong thing at the tempting moment. Please work with me. Let's put our best foot forward. Let's manage this great legacy that is Lake Forest. For this reason, the choice is clear, and that's why I ask for your support. I'm Eric Oshkarian, and I'm asking you that you vote for me on April 2nd. Thank you very much.
Okay. And I'd like to thank both of the candidates, Dr. Desmond and Dr. Goshgarian, for participating in the forum. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters of Lake Forest, Lake Bluff for sponsoring the forum. Remember to vote on April 2nd or in the early voting period. 16 early voting sites open in Lake County tomorrow. And I'd like to thank you all of the audience for attending.